On our wedding anniversary, in order to surprise my wife, I had a serious car accident on my way to the hospital alone by car. My wife, who is an emergency doctor, ran to save her first-love boyfriend who had cut his wrists and attempted suicide. I didn't call her. Watching helplessly as the crashed vehicle exploded and was engulfed in a sea of fire. In my previous life, because of a call for help from me, she left Ryan who had cut his wrists and came to save me. In the end, my life was saved, but Ryan bled to death at home. His body was not found by my wife until 3 days later. My wife said that she didn't blame me and said that all this was her own choice. She even wanted to hold a make-up wedding for us. The night before the wedding, she knocked me unconscious and dragged me to Ryan's house. In the bathtub where he had cut his wrists, she tortured me slowly and cut off the mouth that begged for mercy from her. She looked at my bloody and mangled body, her eyes bloodshot. "Isn't it just a car accident? You won't die. But Ryan lost his life because of your car accident. Today I will let you taste the pain he experienced that day." When I opened my eyes again, I went back to the day of the car accident. After a loud bang, the vehicle kept rolling. My head hit the ground and I fell in a pool of blood. The electric vehicle was violently hit and quickly emitted bursts of white smoke. I didn't expect to be reborn at this time. Realizing this, I used all my strength to crawl out half of my body from the driver's seat. But my lower body was stuck tightly and couldn't move. The passers-by around were afraid that the vehicle explosion would affect them, so they all hid far away. The cries for help were drowned out in the buzzing noise. Seeing that the plan to ask passers-by for help had failed, I could only tremble and dial 120 for help with my mobile phone. The dull pain in my head became more and more obvious. Cold sweat oozed from my forehead and my vision was stained red by blood. The person on the other end of the phone was Claire's colleague. I had met her several times. As soon as she heard my voice, she immediately lowered her tone. "Brother Leo, Dr. Claire is busy today." Before leaving, she specifically told us that if you can't reach her, you may call the office. Okay, I know what you want to ask. But I really can't tell you where she has gone. This call is very important. Don't waste emergency resources. Hang up. When I heard that she was about to hang up, I was completely anxious. During this struggle, the 999 roses I prepared for Claire in the passenger seat directly fell on me. The blood stained the petals. But I didn't have time to look at them. I hurriedly said, "Don't hang up. You misunderstood. I'm not asking about Claire. I had a car accident at this intersection in front of your hospital. Now the vehicle is at risk of exploding at any time. Can you quickly ask someone to..." Before I could finish speaking, she impatiently interrupted, "Brother Leo, stop acting, okay? Dr. Claire is not here. Even if the ambulance comes, you won't see her. Don't make trouble. This call is for saving people. Don't occupy public resources, okay? I'm begging you." She didn't intentionally not answer your call. There is really a matter of life and death over there. During working hours, just work hard. Don't think too much. Wait for her to explain to you after she is done. After saying this, the phone was hung up by her. Desperate tears fell to the ground along the corners of my eyes. I didn't expect Claire to be so ruthless and not leave me any way out. Before, when she was called by Ryan for various reasons, I did call the office to look for her. But I have never lied, let alone occupied and wasted emergency resources. After 7 years of relationship, this is the image I am in her heart in the end. No wonder when she attacked me for Ryan in the previous life, she was so neat and merciless. At a life and death moment, I can't think too much. The temperature inside the car is getting higher and higher, and it seems to be reaching the critical point of explosion. I took a few deep breaths and wiped the blood on my eyes in an attempt to make my vision clear again, but it was in vain. I could only desperately climb out of the broken car window. The palm of my hand was cut by the glass, and the fragments were deeply embedded in the wound. I moved another 10 centimeters out of the car. My strength was gradually exhausted. I lay on the ground in a mess and gasped for breath. The skin of my body was almost cooked by the temperature inside the car. In just 2 minutes, the outside of the vehicle was already covered by thick smoke. More and more passers-by gathered around. Someone kindly shouted for help for me and asked if there was a professional doctor nearby. Soon, a burst of rapid footsteps approached. Claire's department director actually appeared in front of me. The director glanced at the situation around the vehicle and quickly organized kind passers-by to help drag me out of the car. The moment I was brought to a safe area, the vehicle behind me exploded and was engulfed by a sea of fire. The director examined my injuries with rich experience. A circle of passers-by surrounded me. At this moment, they were all asking about the situation. Why hasn't the ambulance been seen for so long after the car accident? The efficiency is too low. Is he okay? I have already called the emergency number just now. I just don't know why it has been busy over there. After finally getting through, as soon as I heard the location, they said I was acting. Before I could say the word car accident, the other side directly hung up the phone. This is really strange. What kind of crazy people did the hospital recruit? Human life is at stake. How dare they have such an attitude when answering the phone? I will file a complaint right now. After this, who would dare to call 120 when something happens? By the time the doctor arrives, one's body would be cold already. Young man, what's your wife's phone number? Auntie will help you contact her. The passerby didn't dare to step forward just now because of fear of explosion. At this moment, the concern shown makes my nose sour. Enduring the excruciating pain all over my body like being torn apart, I weakly shook my head. Even a stranger I met on the street can show such concern for me. But my wife, who has been married to me for 7 years, took my life for her first love who had abandoned her before. The 7-year itch is truly worthy of its reputation. It seems that everything that has happened after being reborn is God reminding me of my stupidity and blindness. No one noticed that the director's face became darker and darker as they spoke. Until he finished examining my condition, he immediately took out his mobile phone and dialed the emergency department. The moment it was connected, he angrily questioned, "Send an ambulance to the intersection immediately. Don't you know there was a car accident here? If I hadn't passed by on my way to work, the injured person would be a dead person now. How many times do we have to call before you come? Who gave you the courage to do this? Do you know the importance of the emergency department? If you can't do this job, get out immediately." 5 minutes later, I was put on an ambulance, but at this moment, the phone in my hand rang. The director kindly helped me press the answer button and put the phone to my ear. In the next second, Claire's angry questioning came from the other end. Hearing her voice again, I couldn't help but shiver. "You even called our department? How long are you going to make a fuss? Didn't I tell you that I have something to do today? Do you have to bother me at this time? Can't a big man have something of his own to do? I am already busy enough at work every day. Can't you stop calling me for every little thing? Can't you live without me? Go out and ask which husband revolves around his wife all day. If I didn't come today, Ryan almost cut his wrists. Do you know? Can't you be more sensible? I will go back by myself after I am done. I don't need you to pick me up." Her impatient voice was faintly mixed with Ryan's comfort. After venting, without waiting for me to finish speaking and without asking about my situation, Claire directly hung up the phone. She didn't even remember from the beginning to the end that today is our 7th wedding anniversary. The indifferent face when she attacked me in my previous life appeared in my mind. Tears mixed with the blood in my eyes dripped on the stretcher. My chest couldn't stop trembling. The intense throbbing pain in my head made me come to my senses. But all of this is not as painful as being cut thousands of times by Claire in my previous life. In the next second, I turned my head and spat out a mouthful of blood on the pillow. At the moment when I was sent into the emergency room, the colleague who answered the phone saw my pale face on the stretcher. She was so scared that her eyes widened instantly. She hurriedly came up and apologized to me, saying that she thought the car accident was an excuse I made up to find Claire. Saying that hanging up my call for help just now was just a misunderstanding. Seeing that something was wrong, the director asked and only then learned that I am Claire's husband who has been married for 7 years. In the next second, He was so angry that his face turned livid and took out his own mobile phone to call Claire. To let me hear clearly, he pressed the speakerphone button at the moment of connection. "Claire, where are you now? Your husband had an accident and is about to have an operation. Come back immediately." I thought that at least she would hesitate when she heard her superior's call. But I didn't expect Claire to say in a deep voice directly, "Director? Did Leo go crazy and find you? Don't believe whatever he says. He is a lunatic now. He quarrels with me at home every day. I am a doctor. I can't just stand by and watch someone die just because I don't want him to be jealous." If I had been one step late today, the injured person would have cut his wrists. His emotions still haven't stabilized until now. Help me explain and tell Leo not to make trouble in the hospital. If he really doesn't listen, then forget it. Believe it or not. The director didn't expect Claire to have such an attitude. He gritted his teeth and tried not to explode on the spot. His forehead was bulging with veins and anger. But in the next second, just as he was about to speak, Ryan's hoarse voice sounded from the other end. "Is it Brother Leo looking for you? Are you leaving? Then I am alone again, right? Also, you have been married for 7 years. I still can't let you go. It's my problem." Claire seemed to be afraid that we would hear. The phone was suddenly hung up by her. After a violent headache, my vision went black and I completely lost consciousness. The director hurriedly pushed me into the operating room. In a coma, my thoughts seemed to return to my previous life. At the first moment of the car accident in my previous life, I called my wife Claire for help. At that time, she was still on her way to find Ryan. Hearing that I had a car accident, she immediately turned around to save me. She used all her strength to drag me out from the driver's seat. Then she called several passers-by to carry me, who was covered in blood, and rushed into the emergency room. It wasn't until I was out of danger that she was relieved. When she sent me home and hurried to find Ryan, she only saw a cold corpse in the bathtub. The wound on the wrist was so deep that the bone could be seen. She didn't say a word and handled Ryan's funeral affairs alone. When she appeared in front of me again, it was already 2 days later. She seemed as if nothing had happened. She calmly told me the news of Ryan's accident. Facing my guilty expression, she shook her head indifferently. She said she didn't blame me. She said that after this incident, she realized how unpredictable life is. She couldn't wait to personally hold a make-up wedding for us. Looking at her eyes and brows that were no different from before, I chose to believe her. As a result, on the night before the wedding, she knocked me unconscious and dragged me to Ryan's house. After the car accident surgery, I lost a lot of weight suddenly, which just made it convenient for her to act. My limbs were tied up by her, and my body collapsed in the bathtub where Ryan cut his wrists. In her eyes looking at me, there was no longer half of the affection of the past, only scarlet hatred and unrelenting resentment remained. Her paranoid face was extremely like a lunatic who had lost the love of her life. The dagger in her hand was shining coldly after being sharpened by her. In my almost collapsing eyes, she slowly said, "It's just a car accident. Could you die? But Ryan lost me and he really died. Do you know how deep his wound was? Do you know how much blood he lost that day? He was lying in this position and in this posture, the blood flowed to his calf." After studying medicine for so many years, for the first time, I knew that there was so much blood in a person's body that there was no other color in my eyes. It doesn't matter if you don't know. You will know soon. After saying that, she placed Ryan's mourning photo in front of the bathtub. In front of his photo, she cut open the skin on my chest with a knife. The moment the dagger pierced my body, I was in so much pain that I almost fainted. Before I could recover, she reached out and violently tore the layers of flesh and skin of my wound. My whole body was soaked with cold sweat and blood. I was so frightened that my eyes almost popped out. But no matter how much I shook my head and roared, she remained indifferent. She even thought my voice was annoying. She directly cut off the mouth that begged for mercy from her. And cut off my tongue. Then, she raised the knife and dropped it. Soon, a bloody heart appeared in front of me. At that time, when the heart was suddenly pulled out, before I could lose consciousness, my eyes could still see the scene in front of me. I thought this was the end of her revenge for Ryan, but I didn't expect it was just the beginning of her madness. She raised the dagger and dropped it one after another on my body. The murmurs in her mouth were like ghosts and madness. It's this deep. It's this position. It's this much blood. Ryan must be in great pain. He must have needed me very much at that time. 1 second before I died, I counted a full 1,000 cuts, the 1,000 cuts she made on my whole body. At that moment, I clearly realized how superb her medical skills were. How quickly she acted. After I died, she threw my body in the bathtub. Holding Ryan's ashes, she held a wedding. My soul was floating aside. Looking at the crazy obsession in her eyes, I finally realized my stupidity, but it was too late. I should have known long ago. From the moment Ryan returned to the country on our wedding day 7 years ago. From the moment she received that call and left me at the wedding. Even at the beginning, she was abandoned by Ryan and came to provoke me. Compared to Ryan, I still had no chance of winning. A wedding without a bride. A marriage without love. I supported it alone for 7 years, now it finally ends in bloodshed. When I opened my eyes again, I was already lying in a hospital ward. The injured head was wrapped up like a zongzi. Blood was faintly seeping through the gauze. I looked at the ceiling feebly with my eyes and reached out to take out my mobile phone from beside the pillow. Just as I was about to send a divorce message to Claire. Her call came in first. I pressed answer. Before I could speak, she scolded me head on. What's going on with the rumors on the internet? Did you spread them? Are you crazy? Do you know how much impact this has on the hospital? Delete it immediately. I really can't stand you for a day. Don't you know that spreading rumors is illegal? Can you be like a normal person? Delete it. Otherwise, I will divorce you immediately. Before I could hear clearly, the call was hung up by her. Hatred drowned out reason. My nails were deeply embedded in my palm. My knuckles trembled with force. But this time Ryan is fine. She didn't do anything excessive. I have no reason to call the police to arrest her. Remembering what she had just said, I opened my phone and took a look. Only then did I find out that on the day of the car accident, some passerby took a video and posted it online. Netizens all noticed the key point that the emergency call was made, but no one cared. For a while, the emergency department of the hospital was scolded on the hot search by the whole network. If it weren't for the appearance of the director at the end to reduce some of the heat, I'm afraid the hospital would have been scolded and closed on the spot. I searched for the hospital's official account on the software. It has been closed due to being sprayed by netizens. There is indeed a fatal loophole in the work of the emergency department. I have no reason to take down the video and clarify. Instead, I am happy to see it happen. I clicked into Ryan's circle of friends, but it was completely different from the chaos in the hospital. A peaceful and comfortable atmosphere. There is no sign of self-harm at all. When I was having surgery, he even updated a post. A perfect lover is the medicine that cures all psychological diseases. Seeing this sentence, I smiled with full sarcasm. Silently gave a thumbs up to his acting skills. Such a good, perfect lover, just keep it for yourself to enjoy. Just 1 minute after giving the thumbs up, Claire's call came again. This time I didn't answer it. I directly hung up and then pulled the number into the blacklist. But at this moment, her message box popped up above the screen. Why did you scold Ryan? If you have something against me, don't go crazy in front of him. I quickly sent her the word divorce. Then I also blacklisted this software's contact method. But at this time, there was a commotion in the corridor outside. Reporters poured into the hospital lobby one after another, demanding to interview the person in charge of the emergency department. The medical staff were shouting that taking pictures was prohibited. The director also came out of the office to maintain order, saying that he was the person involved in the video. But it was still futile. The hospital director rushed over after receiving the news, but everyone still didn't buy it. Under the pressure of public opinion, the hospital handed over the female colleague who answered my call for help that day. She was sobbing uncontrollably and explained while twitching that she was just used by Claire. The mistake at work was really unintentional. Then, the hospital director's call was made to Claire's mobile phone, ordering her to appear within half an hour. The director was afraid that I would be affected by the reporters. He came in and reminded me not to walk around casually. He said they would deal with it. This matter was the hospital's fault in the first place. As soon as I nodded, the door of the ward was knocked open by Claire from outside. She directly ignored the director beside her and rushed in with full anger and shouted at me, "Can't you understand when I ask you to explain? You know exactly what happened at that time. Don't blame me for suing you if you keep spreading rumors. Making such a mess. Do you really want to divorce me? Then let's divorce." She didn't notice what I said. Her gaze fell on the layers of gauze wrapped around my head. Her eyes were full of astonishment. After being stunned for 2 seconds, she slowly said, "What's going on?" A sarcastic smile tugged at the corner of my lips. My voice was so indifferent that no emotion could be heard. "Can't you see? A car accident. Why, is my acting so realistic that even a professional doctor like you believes it?" This was our first meeting after being reborn. My gaze towards her was ice cold. The love of 7 years in the past is gone. Now there is only deep-rooted hatred left. The scenes of being cut thousands of times by her in my previous life were playing one by one in front of my eyes. Under the quilt, my nails were firmly pinching the palm of my hand. I forcibly controlled myself so as not to lose my composure in front of her. Claire is very clear about how much I value and care about our relationship. So when she heard me say the word divorce, she didn't believe it. Her first reaction was anger. "Are you still acting? Take off the gauze on your head. It looks unlucky." Sensing something was wrong, she took a step back and looked at the ward number. Only when she stepped in again did she question me, "Why are you in the emergency department? Don't you know that there is a shortage of beds in the emergency department? At least there should be a limit to your nonsense. Isn't it endless? Get up quickly and get out." The obvious scolding in her voice was as if I had done something terribly wrong. Occupying the precious medical resources of their department. The director saw the scene and couldn't bear it anymore. He couldn't believe that this was actually the doctor he had brought up. Taking 2 deep breaths, he scolded angrily, "This is your responsibility as a wife? You can even look at your husband like this. No wonder you can be indifferent to the call for help. How can I trust you with patients? Now get out immediately and apologize to the media." Claire widened her eyes and said firmly, "What's there to explain? What he said is originally false. Just let him explain directly, isn't it okay? What crime have I committed? My only crime is finding this man who is always making trouble for no reason and finding fault with me." The director was so angry that he couldn't catch his breath. He shouted angrily, "Have you ever watched the video on the internet? Do you know what you are here for today? If the video is false, how could the hospital be scolded like this? Could it be that except you, no one else has a brain? Are we all idlers? How could Claire become like this?" The tone of disappointment was too obvious. In my impression, the director has always been a gentle elder in Claire's mouth. Looking at Claire's astonished expression at this moment, one can know that this is probably the first time the director has shown a cold face to her. When speaking again, her voice was a little hesitant. "What do you mean? What's wrong with the video? Isn't it just that Leo randomly found it on the internet to spread rumors?" She didn't even take a look at the news on the internet. As soon as she arrived at the hospital, she found the ward and scolded me without asking anything. I was full of sarcasm and my expression became more and more indifferent. The director was furious. His chest was heaving violently. The disappointment in his eyes grew stronger and stronger. He directly took out his own mobile phone and found the video on the internet. Put it in front of Claire and press play. In the picture, my appearance of climbing out from the window of the driver's seat is extremely clear. The billowing white smoke cannot be faked. The ground is stained red with blood. The torso is forced to deform under great pressure. At the end of the video, with an explosion, the playback ends. Claire's standing body swayed feebly. Her gaze was fixed on the screen and she couldn't come to her senses for a long time. It was already 2 minutes later when she found her own voice. Looking at me, there was no more accusatory look just now. Instead, there was a faintly guilty dodge in her eyes. "So, the car accident." Her eyebrows were slightly wrinkled and her pupils were trembling. She wanted to know the answer but was afraid to listen. I couldn't help but sneer. What about the car accident? Didn't I say it? I was acting. The passers-by are all actors, I found. The exploding car is also a prop. Have you forgotten the video you just watched? Was my acting good? Don't you consider giving me an award? By the way, advertise your hospital. Claire's face was visibly pale. Her lips were constantly quivering, opening and closing, but she couldn't say a word. It was exactly the same as when Ryan went abroad and I found her drunk by the roadside. After a while, she swallowed several times in her throat. Then she said, I came in a hurry and really didn't watch the video carefully. I thought the video was false. I can explain. I really ran out to save people at that time. It wasn't for any personal matter and there was no selfishness. You know how serious I am about my work. After saying this, my heart was full of sarcasm. In 7 years of relationship, she had said countless times that I saved her from a difficult situation when Ryan left. It even made me think that I was the salvation in her life. But now, even words about my life being at stake need evidence to make her believe. At this point in the relationship, it is no different from an enemy. Seeing that she was finally a little more awake, the director directly pulled her clothes and pulled her out of the ward. Before leaving, only one sentence was left: don't affect the patient's mood. Save your time to explain to the reporters. The hospital is in chaos because of you now. The hospital director has been taking the blame for you for a long time. If you can't explain clearly this time, you don't need to come to work anymore. The echoes in the corridor gradually dissipated until their footsteps could no longer be heard. The reporters outside poured into the lobby. At this moment, the originally empty place was crowded. The staff on duty in the hospital all had solemn expressions and their gazes were solemn. This is probably the biggest crisis the hospital has faced since its establishment. Claire was pulled to the scene by the director. Then she was hastily introduced as the wife of the protagonist in the video. She is also a doctor in the emergency department of the hospital. Then, Claire was pushed into the middle of the reporters. This action directly made the originally relatively calm reporters' emotions instantly excited. Microphones with different company logos almost forcefully poked into Claire's mouth. The questions in their mouths were more and more tricky. Someone asked if it was because her relationship with her husband was broken that she deliberately told the emergency department not to answer my call. Someone else asked if Claire had planned to deliberately kill someone long ago. Has the exploded vehicle been sent for inspection? Was the accident that was not taken over by the emergency department in the first place an accident or man-made? Before the previous answer could be thought of, the next more tricky question came. Claire's weak explanation was completely swallowed into her throat under the deadly questioning. Cold sweat slipped from her forehead and quickly fell into her collar. She was full of entanglement but couldn't make a sound for a long time. The reporters swarmed up and surrounded her inside and out. Claire had no choice but to retreat step by step. Finally, she was forced into a corner. Seeing that there was no way to retreat behind, when the suppressed anger in her eyes was about to erupt on the spot, I walked out of the ward, supporting myself against the wall. I borrowed a loudspeaker from the nurse's station next to me. Just as I was about to press the switch, Claire shouted angrily, "Enough! Can you listen to me?" Just because Leo couldn't reach me before, he often called our hospital's emergency center. He didn't say what disease it was. He just named me specifically and said he wanted to find me. Everyone knows that doctors are too busy to look at their mobile phones at all. After I went back to the department, I heard my colleagues talk about this. I went home and immediately reasoned and argued with him. I specifically told him not to call the emergency number. This way it is easy to delay people who really need rescue. As a result, he nodded on the surface, but in fact he didn't take my words to heart at all. As long as he couldn't reach me, he would immediately call 120. My colleague can also testify to this. This time I left the hospital also to save people. I didn't expect such a thing to happen just after I was away for a while. Because of the previous lesson, my colleague ignored him and thought he was joking again like before. After saying this, She looked expectantly at the female colleague who answered my call when the accident happened. The tacit gazes of the two met in the air. Then, the other party immediately nodded. She spoke to the reporters, "That's right. He did call several times before. At that time, we were all very busy. We were afraid that his calls looking for Dr. Claire would delay patients who really needed rescue. That's why there was a misunderstanding this time." A human life was thus casually described as a story of the boy who cried wolf in their mouths. I didn't hesitate to press the on switch of the loudspeaker in my hand. In the next second, a loud sound came out of the loudspeaker. "What they just said is all lies. I am the protagonist in the car accident video. I can prove that everything they just said doesn't exist. It's because my wife wanted to find another man, her first love, when I had a car accident. So she asked her colleague to help cover up. As for the calls I made to the emergency center that she mentioned, it's even more nonsense. If you don't believe me, I can retrieve the call records right now and print them from the business hall. In that way, the records cannot be faked and cannot be deleted." At the moment when I finished speaking, Claire was so resentful that she almost glared out her eyes. She didn't expect that I could appear in public and slap her in the face. In the past, as long as it was beneficial to her career, I could unconditionally back down. No matter how much grievance I suffered, as long as she casually explained to me afterwards, I could choose to forgive. As if nothing had happened. Even when she had to perform an operation temporarily on our wedding anniversary, in fact, it was to give a gift to Ryan. Even when she said that there was a hospital meeting during my parents' funeral, in fact, it was to accompany Ryan on a trip. Reluctant to give up our relationship and reluctant to give up my sincere dedication. So I backed down step by step, finding excuses for her step by step. Now thinking about it, perhaps it was my unconditional concessions in these 7 years that gradually nourished the thought of her cheating in her heart. For a full 7 years, I didn't even give her a cold face. The accumulated resentment erupted all at once, making me so painful that I was shattered. It can also burn the two of them, the immoral couple, to ashes. The way I spoke was so confident that even without presenting substantial evidence, the reporters on the scene had already quietly sided with me, especially seeing the gauze wrapped around my head still faintly oozing blood. The gazes were full of sympathy and pity. Even though I appeared unprepared, the reporters didn't rush up to embarrass me. Nor did they ask me a single question. On the contrary, Claire's gaze at me was as venomous as if poisoned. As if I were not her husband who had been married to her for 7 years and loved her deeply, but her father's murderer. We were standing nearly 20 meters apart. But I could clearly see her tightly clenched jaw, almost grinding her teeth to pieces. The venomous face and indifferent expression could no longer coincide with my wife in my memory. After I finished speaking for a long time, the quiet atmosphere on the scene was instantly exploded to a climax. The reporters' actions of rushing towards Claire became more and more intense. Even all the security guards in the hospital couldn't stop them when they came on stage together. Everyone crowded in front of Claire and asked one question after another, asking if she ignored her husband because of cheating. Is it because of cheating that she wants to kill people through this car accident? Under one question after another, Claire's face was pale. Her lips were tightly pursed. The development of the matter had already exceeded her control. She never expected that the family conflict with me could come to this point. After dodging her eyes for a long time, she finally trembled and said, "I have already said that I was not in the hospital at that time because I was going to save people. That injured person had a very serious psychological disease. At that time, he called me and said that he was going to cut his wrists and commit suicide. As a doctor in the emergency department, how could I stand by and watch someone die? I am just fulfilling my responsibilities and obligations as a doctor. How can it be related to his cheating? There are so many male patients in the hospital every day. Can it be that all of them have an affair with the doctor?" There is not a single piece of evidence in what Leo said. This is purely slander and defamation. I can contact and call that injured person to explain for me right now. I have been enlightening him for a long time and his emotions have just stabilized. After saying this, she started to call Ryan. To make the reporters believe, she also deliberately put it on speakerphone. The sound was recorded into the camera from the microphone. I gently curled up one side of my lips and said, "Who said I have no evidence?" "The evidence. I have just posted it online. Everyone can open their mobile phones and take a look. It's in the comment area under that video. I'm not lying." Before walking out of the ward, I did receive a photo from Ryan. In the photo, two people were lying on the bed, holding hands with 10 fingers intertwined. The scar on Claire's finger left from a previous surgery as a symbol of identity was also extremely clear. Perhaps Ryan himself didn't expect it. His wanton showing off to me will become the last straw to crush Claire. As soon as I received his photo, after looking at it, I directly forwarded it online. After so long, everyone on the whole network should have seen that photo by now. When the reporters heard this, they all took out their mobile phones and clicked on the comment area. After they all verified my words one by one, the call that Claire had just made hadn't been answered yet. Her eyes changed from firm at the beginning to evasive later. Then came reluctance and anger. In just 10 minutes, she had almost imagined the scene of her career being ruined. But her love for Ryan made her instinctively rule out all suspicions about him. Claire only thought that he was busy, so he didn't have time to answer. She stubbornly and unwillingly made dozens of calls again, but the prompt tone that came to her ears was always the same sentence. She called for half an hour, and the reporters on the scene waited for her for half an hour. Even the hospital director in the distance had his heart in his throat, waiting for the result of her explanation. The director was even more nervous with his lips tightly pursed. But reality often goes against expectations. It didn't develop in the direction they hoped. Ryan still didn't answer in the end. Claire was completely plunged into collapse. After the last call was rejected, she suddenly raised her phone and threw it on the ground in public. The screen shattered into fragments, and she was so angry that her eyes were bloodshot, just like the way she attacked me in my previous life. I couldn't help but take a step back. Claire tightly pulled her hair with both hands and kept wailing, "It's impossible. He must have been delayed by something." I was still enlightening him before I left. He also said that when he gets better, he will travel with me. I will ask again later. He must have been delayed by something. The words she said were full of uncertainty. Even her own face showed suspicion. But on second thought, even if Ryan came forward to explain, it wouldn't change anything. If the photo hadn't been sent out, she could still turn the situation around. But now it's a fact that the two of them are having an affair. Once Ryan comes forward, nothing more than the number of people being scolded changes from 1 to 2. No one is willing to do such a losing business. Seeing that the reporters could no longer hold back, the hospital director completely lost patience. He could only come forward and publicly announce the handling result of this medical accident. Suspend Claire and the female colleague who answered my call during the car accident for inspection. The moment he announced the result, Claire seemed to be drained of all her strength. She collapsed on the ground feebly. The reporters had been waiting for a long time. Now that they finally got the result, they all dispersed. The lobby quickly returned to its usual deserted state. Only Claire's collapsed figure remained. The female colleague who was implicated by her caught up with the hospital director's footsteps and wanted to plead for herself. Her humble appearance was completely different from her arrogance when she answered my call. Unfortunately, as a party involved, she couldn't stay out of it anymore. From the moment she agreed to cover up for Claire in front of me, her ending was already doomed. I supported myself against the wall and turned back to the ward. I thought that this time Claire would turn her hatred to Ryan, go and take revenge on him directly, just like she did to me in my previous life. But she followed my footsteps and walked into the ward. Hearing the sound, I looked back. Thinking of being beaten to an unrecognizable state by her in my previous life, I slowly backed away, holding the phone in my hand, ready to call the police at any time. Just when she was about to speak, the director suddenly pushed the door and came in. Claire gave me a cold glance and could only leave in embarrassment. Only then did I breathe a sigh of relief. But before I could contact the hospital to change my ward, I heard the news that Claire had been arrested and taken to the police station. Because of a murder case. The deceased is Ryan. He died at his home. After I inquired, I learned that Claire went directly to Ryan's place as soon as she left the hospital. As a result, she caught him packing his luggage and trying to run abroad. She was caught red-handed. Claire grabbed him and asked why he refused to testify for her. While talking, she dragged him towards the door. But Ryan directly said without thinking that he didn't want to be implicated by her. Now that the situation had been set, it was impossible to clear the suspicion no matter what was said. If he came forward, not only could he not save her, but he would also get himself involved. At that time, Claire had been so stimulated that she was on the verge of collapse. Of course, she couldn't let him leave. She only angrily questioned, saying that he had clearly said that he would die if he left her. As a result, Ryan mocked her in person. His psychiatric diagnosis was just a fake, but she was still deceived by it. If it weren't for the fact that he couldn't stay abroad anymore and heard that she had entered a big hospital, he wouldn't have come back. But she didn't expect that Claire couldn't even handle her own family affairs well. A divorce was dragged on for 7 years. In the end, she got nothing and wasted 7 years of her life. This sentence completely shattered Claire's last trace of sanity. While Ryan was buried in packing his luggage, she rushed into the kitchen, took a knife and slashed at his neck. Watching him bleed profusely in front of her. Watching him draw his last breath in front of her. Then she dragged the body and surrendered herself. Before entering prison, she left me a divorce agreement signed by herself. She said that she was ashamed of me in this life. But she would never know that not only in this life, what she owed me in her previous life could never be repaid. I took the divorce agreement and went home. When my wound had almost recovered, I sold the house. I went to live in another city. I don't want to set foot in this place full of sorrow and memories again in this life. The end.